Well, now if you are the smartest person in the room, if you solve every problem that comes your way, that's not what leadership looks like. I've got to go build a leader that can make great decisions. So if I jump in and I tell them the answer, guess what happens the next time there's a problem that comes up? They come back to you. And so now you just have higher overhead. You're not getting any more, velocity or leverage. And so the stage really after that, it becomes you step into your role as a CEO. Actually, it matches in title and in function, where you really are responsible for the vision and the alignment of your team around that vision.
Welcome to the podcast. Nathan Newberry here, your host. I have Johnny Page here on the line here that's going to be joining us in the podcast. But before we do, and for you to hear his story, I want to just give a free gift to you. There's a training down below in the show notes around how to build an online audience. So many of my students and so many of my audience, they want to know how to build an online, presence, how to integrate, marketing and sales together, how to build teams, how to have the right dashboards. All that training I put together in this training. Check that out. That's going to be super helpful as a free resource for you. Johnny, diving into our podcast here, I want to ask you a question that I ask everybody, but what is the high performance? What does that look like to you? How do you apply that to your life? Help the audience understand that a little bit more with your definition there.
Yeah, I think it matters how long you measure, right? So high performance, does that mean it's in a moment, or does it mean over the course of someone's career? And if you're going to have longevity to performing well, performing above average, I think it comes down to working on the right project, for the right mission. You're on the right team, and it's really value aligned for you. So there's a alignment that says, I am perfectly made for this mission. And it's, a culmination of all my life experiences and my relationships and the skills I've acquired, all dedicated towards a worthy mission. And so, to me, high performance is not only, it's just about it's the right lane and, the right skill set, background, and habits. So, I don't know if that's how I define it.
It's a little bit different than others, and I like it. But tell us a little bit about your story, Johnny, because what do you do to help serve clients right now? Because you've had your own companies, but now you're the CEO of SaaS Academy, and you're a husband, you're a father, you're a high performer yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you serve clients.
Yeah. So today I spend most of my time I'm as a CEO of SaaS Academy. So we help B2B SaaS founders grow and scale their companies. We work with about 500 founders in across 3 different programs right now. This is everything from helping founders get started for when they've got zero in revenue, they've got a product and they're trying to figure out how to go to market, all the way up to scaling beyond 30 million in annual revenue. So you have 3 different programs designed to serve customers at each different stage of the business through 0 to 30 million. I'm also the co-author of Software as a Science, which is a book that teaches founders our methodology that we use to help those companies. So we give away the methodology for free. And then if you want some help, I call it getting in the fast lane. If you want some support from people that have done it with thousands of founders before, myself included. We used to be a client of SaaS Academies, and you can come and work with us.
I love it. Now bring us back to the beginning of this, Johnny. I think what people love to hear is the origin stories of where this all began, because many of our listeners they find themselves feeling alone because they're wired differently than most. They don't have a clear understanding or people don't understand them oftentimes of how they think, they process things. They're obsessive about growth, obsessive in different ways. How did you know you were a little bit different? Bring us back to the very beginning of the, 1.0 of Johnny, of that line in the sand moment, if you would.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So I went to school for business, but I tell people all the time I majored in golf because I played golf at Lincoln Memorial University, and my entire life's mission was to play on the PGA Tour. I would, if you go back in time, you ask, 20-year-old Johnny, what would success look like and what would failure look like? Anything short of playing on the PGA Tour would have been considered a failure. And so I played 3 years at Lincoln Memorial University, and I had 1 year of eligibility left when I graduated. And I kind of came to a fork in the road in my life that said, I can either go on to play at the University of Tampa, play one more year of eligibility and start pursuing my master's, or I can move out to California. My family at the time, I was in North Carolina, and my extended family lived on the central coast of California, where conveniently it never snowed, and my grandparents lived within a mile of 3 golf courses. And so when I started to recognize what student debt looked like, I had a scholarship, but didn't cover the full thing. When I started to realize what student debt looked like, the master's program started to seem a little less exciting. I figured, let me just go out to California and play some golf. I'll work at a golf course, and we'll see if I can, extend this dream of playing professionally. And so I put everything I owned into the back of a Nissan Altima, and I make the cross country drive about 900 miles into the trip. My engine blows, and I got about $1,300 in my bank, and now I have like no car. But I felt in that moment that like something, California had something for me. I just, felt, call it a knowing, call it a calling. I just felt like I was still on the right path, despite my life circumstances not really shaping up to support that. And so I rented enough, cars for long enough to get out to my grandparents' house. And I ended up, staying with them for the first 9 months I was in California, walking to the golf course, opening the course from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. and working, and then, playing until it got dark. And I did that for about 5 months. And then I met my wife, because, or who would go on to be my wife. She just happened to be willing to, I met her through a friend group, and she started picking me up and give me rides to go to a beach bonfire or whatever, and hang out with a group of friends. Yeah. And I started to realize, when I started doing the math of all of the support that I lost in going from playing collegiate golf to just pursuing it solo, there's just so much, in your ecosystem that's supporting your progression. I lost all of that. And I'm looking at, if I want to pursue having a long-term relationship with this girl, like I probably need to have a real job. I can't be working at a golf course, living in my grandparents' spare room, and without a car. And so I ended up taking a job at a security company to sell software. To sell security services. And early into that career, I was looking for a differentiation of like, why would someone buy this? You're buying a security guard service to stand at your property. What makes ours different than others? And I ended up coming across this software company. It's called Silvertrack. And they were very early. They had developed this software product to help give essentially proof of work to their customers. So if you hire a security guard to come stay at your, let's just call it a construction site, how do you know they actually stayed there? Instead of like filling out a report and just leaving for the night, or falling asleep, or being the person that actually stole the stuff they're trying to protect. So this software company got created, and I thought, when I saw the technology, I was like, man, they've got to be mass market, days away from a massive acquisition. Like, it's such a game changer. Turns out this was 2 brothers and a cousin that had built this for their own security company, and they were just going to market with it. So I spent 6 months blowing up this security company, selling a lot of security services, because I was using the software to prove that we would actually do the work when no one else in the industry was doing it. And I end up talking to the founders of this company, and it turns out like I'm one of their first 5 customers. And they're like, hey, we're going to hire a bunch of straight commission sales reps to you'll get 30% of the revenue, of the recurring revenue that you sell. And at the time, a license for the software was $300 a month. And I remember sitting over a kitchen table convincing my dad that I was going to leave the security gig. I was like, it was starting to be stable. I'm paying my student loans. I bought a car. I move out. I'm engaged to my fiance. Like, things are going well. And I told my dad, I'm going to leave this job to go do a straight commission selling software. And my dad thought I was crazy. And fast forward, it was 3 years later, I had sold over $2 million in annual recurring revenue on this, and I was getting 30% of it. I would go on to CEO that company. But I think if you ask me, like, what's the line in the sand moment, it's probably sitting over the dinner table with my dad saying, hey, I think I'm going to leave this job and go into software. And that came off the back of like having been a user of the product and seeing just how game changing it was, and just believing that I could get this into more security companies' hands. And so that's what took me from the golf course into software, and I've been in this in this world ever since.
And if you're a young entrepreneur, that's always good. If you're not married yet, if you find a gal, that's always a good incentive. And then those moments with people that you look up to, like your dad, where they're looking one direction for you and you're like, no, I got to go this different path. That's a hard conversation to have. That's not an easy one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many people take the path of least
Mm-hmm.
resistance, or someone that they look up to in a sense of just like, I got to get something safe. You went the wrong, different direction, not the wrong, different direction. And it panned out to be amazing. And you built this, and now you're the CEO of SaaS Academy, which is, if you don't know, like Dan Martell, who's the influencer that I think many people see now, was the one that started that years ago, and you took over. How was that transition too? Because that wasn't an easy one to take the shoulders off of, Dan, and then now leading this group. Like, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's two. I've done this twice now, where I started in a company, and it fits with the title of the podcast. Like I perform extremely well in the roles that I'm in. I start off day one like I own the thing. So I was a straight commission sales rep at Silvertrack, and 7 years later, I'm the CEO and I lead them through a multi-million-dollar exit. Never owner in the company throughout the whole process, right? But the whole time I showed up as if I was. And so like more and more responsibility and stewardship and experiences come my way. Well, in that time, I was actually a SaaS Academy client for 2 years. So I joined in 2017, and Dan's at the time is the one running SaaS Academy. So I'm on coaching calls with Dan on a regular basis in a group setting. And I'm a client from 2017 to 2019, all the way through our acquisition. And after the acquisition, Dan and I stayed in touch. He would call me every 3 to 6 months and just say like, hey, what are you up to right now? Just knowing that we got acquired by overnight. I go from leading a team of about 30 people to leading a team of 50 inside a company of 250. And the company that purchased us purchased 4 other software solutions. So if you've lived through the stages of a company to know what it's like to be in an early stage SaaS company, how quickly things move, how quickly you can pull an idea and pull it into reality versus when you're a 250 person company. And now today they're over 500 employees, things move a lot slower. So Dan knew Johnny's not going to last long in that environment. Let me keep on, nurturing the conversation. He shared more of his perspective of the story on a episode of our podcast that we did, many months ago. But he just kept on, calling me every 3 to 6 months saying, hey, what are you up to? How's it still going? And then, an opportunity came up where he was looking for someone to lead his customer success team at SaaS Academy. SaaS Academy has gone from Dan not even thinking he would coaching a few dozen founders all the way up to today. We've had over 3,000 founders come through our programs, and he just needed someone to help make sure that like client experience was consistent as we continue to scale the company. And so that was my foot in the door. And I came over to just take over our customer success team. And 6 months later, I was running customer success and I was running marketing. And, 6 months after that, I was running our entire revenue team. So sales, marketing, and customer success. And then, we made a plan in, I believe it was 2021 of what would it look like for me to take over as the CEO and to continue making this, to growing SaaS Academy from being this really personality focused business. At the time, like, when I came to work here, it was, danmartell.com, and the program was SaaS Academy. Well, we've gone through, like, we've launched the SaaS Academy website. We've written a book together. There's so much, there's over 25 coaches in our program. So it's a lot more than the personality. And so when we sat down and had that conversation of, hey, what's it look like for Johnny to take over? Core to that mission is SaaS Academy is going to impact a lot more founders than Dan will individually, right? If it keeps on being about proximity to Dan, this falls way short of its potential. So let's make this about a methodology. Let's make this about the, have people come to us for the strategy and the method that we have for growing SaaS companies, not the personality. The personality can be additive, and Dan still, occasionally speaks at our events, and of course is a co-author on the book. But a lot of people have contributed to the mission that we've got here at SaaS Academy and the methodology. And Dan's one of them. He's the instigator. But that transition was, me having been a client and really seeing like how much of this was really only could be delivered by Dan, and then how much of it was about the method that had been created by Dan and a number of our coaches. So the transition's been certainly there's in any level of business, there's every level, there's a new devil. There's not a single company out there that's like, yeah, this is easy. It's just like, you're up against new challenges. And this has been one that we feel pretty passionate about making sure that this gets into the hands of as many founders as possible.
Let me ask you this question, being a CEO and you're an intrapreneur, right? And the motive behind everything, I think people see of like, hey, to grow wealth or to be, cutting edge or thinking about growth, you have to be an entrepreneur, which is a big sexy thing out there. But really the other heavy scope that many people forget is the intrapreneur that's running like an entrepreneur internally in a big company. And Ready, Fire, Aim book talks a lot about this. Patrick Bet-David talks about this in the 5, Next Steps book. And then you also have the book with Patrick Lencioni talking about the motive of like the CEO, right? Of like, is this the right role? Is it the right job? Talk about like what you've seen, especially being in SaaS, where you see deal with a lot of founders there, you being a CEO and being an entrepreneur. Like, talk to us about like the foundations of that and what like differentiates that a little bit more, so people in the audience that are entrepreneurs can gauge for themselves of what their path is on is the best.
Yeah, I'll take this two different directions. So first off, I think, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, right? I think that way. Like I mentioned, like I don't make a very good employee. I'm going to have a very strong opinion and I'm pretty obsessive over the things that I'm working on. So like on day one, when I show up at Silvertrack, and then same thing at SaaS Academy, I'm not thinking what's my job versus what's other people's jobs. Like I'm getting plugged into the mission and it's going to get everything I've got. And until the day that it doesn't, and then it'll be put into something else. It just has happened. My life experience has been that I've had a ton of belief and passion for the product that I was working on. If you think back to the story, I was a user of Silvertrack before I came to work there. Like I saw how incredible it was. And then still true to my story today, I was a client at SaaS Academy. Like there's nothing that I do all of our podcasts and a lot of our marketing and our ads and stuff. There's not a single thing that I am convincing another founder to do that I have not done. I walked a mile in these shoes, and I can tell you my life has been forever changed because of both of these products and services and what they did to me personally and the businesses that I was in. So I think that if you feel entrepreneurial, first off, it's this like, I don't put constraints around what's my job or what's not. It's the mission, right? And so I'm getting plugged into, does this need to exist and more people need to hear about it? And then what's the role that I can play to contribute to that? That doesn't mean that at all times, if I'm in customer success, mission number one is make customer success incredible, right? It has to, you earn more responsibility by performing well in the role that you're in. But I just think like if you're listening and you are either in an organization or you're an entrepreneur and you're just not convinced about the job or the product that you're building, the services you're building, go find someone else's that you are and go, spend some time. I felt like it was an incredible experience. Would I have loved to have been a founder and have equity at Silvertrack? Of course. But man, I got to play in someone else's sandbox with zero risk. And I got the experience that came from that. And man, that is like, I've compounded that experience into what I've done at SaaS Academy. And I've learned how to have the conversation on how to become a partner. Like Dan and I are partners in this business. Like I have equity in SaaS Academy. We are co-authors in the book. I've learned how to have the conversation to say, hey, you know what? I've earned trust and through results, the first year and a half, 2 years I was working with Dan. And then of course, as a client, he builds a lot of familiarity and builds a lot of trust. I put a lot of points on the board for SaaS Academy before I ever had a conversation that said, hey, you know what? If I'm going to keep on building this mission, I need to be able to be able to build wealth through this. I need to be able to, feel good about the effort that I'm putting in and the yield that comes from it. And I've just learned how to, create a win-win scenario. Dan looks at this and says, hey, you know what? I think SaaS Academy's got a lot more potential with Johnny as a part of the cap table and as an owner of the company than it does without him. So, I've learned a lot over the years on how to have those conversations, but to me, it's always just been about the mission first. Like if I would have absolutely gone and started another product or an idea if I felt as passionate about that as I did about, Silvertrack or SaaS Academy. So, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
And I appreciate you bringing some of that stuff up. And I love your path forward. I think so much so like people miss the components of learning sales. which is a skill in some aspects, but like what you brought up of like people sense your heart around how convicted you are around what you sell, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
mission that you have where it's just like you're all in obsessed, and that focus is what makes the biggest difference in anybody to grow. Like when you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
like growth of a company, what does that look like? You know, sometimes people stall out in their business growth. And I remember, you know, you could see different phases of business, you know, and even Ready, Fire, Aim in that book, it talks about like, you know, 0 to 1 million, and then 1 million to 10 million, and then 10 million to 100 million. And I think that's a good gauge. And I wonder if it's different in SaaS or coaching companies, where if there's different element with that or what you've seen, what does that growth look like? What is the trajectory? When do you hire? To talk about some of those milestones there.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the business it's very different role for the founder, a requirement of the founder at different stages. And that is that in the early days, you're
Mm-hmm.
wearing all the hats, right? You got to go figure, you're the product person, you're the delivery person, you're the salesperson, the marketing person. And that's really, it's by design, and it's really helpful. It's hard to build a great product without having hand to hand, conversations with your potential buyers. And so, you go from really early stages wearing every hat to now learning how to hire individual contributors. So you become a manager for the first time. So, okay, I figured out how to deliver customer success or how to, do a marketing. And now I have to figure out how to get that result through someone else. So that's really the second stage, when you start to add in a layer of an individual contributors into the business. Now the person, the CEO, becomes a manager. The next stage, and we typically see this, you're going to manage a team of individual contributors all the way up to, in a software company, to about $1 million in annual recurring revenue. You start to hire your first level of leaders between 1 million and 3 million. Every business is different. There's certainly, I tell you, there's exceptions to every rule. So you may be listening and there may be exceptions, but generally speaking, I've seen 3,000 founders come through SaaS Academy. Generally speaking, at about 1 million in revenue, you start to hire your first level of leaders. And now the game changes again. And the founder has to become exceptional at leading through leaders. And it's a totally different skill set for that founder. The main challenge I see here at this phase, what holds people back from being able to make this transformation, is that it's not as satisfying on a daily basis to when you are leading leaders as it was when you were the individual contributor. Because you used to go home every day and you'd be like, you got a lot of shit done. You could cross a lot of things off your to-do list. Well, now, if you are the smartest person in the room, if you solve every problem that comes your way, that's not what leadership looks like. I've got to go build a leader that can make great decisions. So if I jump in and I tell them the answer, guess what happens the next time there's a problem that comes up? They come back to you. And so now you just have higher overhead. You're not getting any more, velocity or leverage. And so the stage really after that, it becomes, you step into your role as a CEO. Actually, it matches in title and in function, where you really are responsible for the vision and the alignment of your team around that vision. And you can, so most of our work at SaaS Academy and the way we think about growing businesses is helping them get through that. There's a lot of great software companies out there that just haven't paired it with the founder being able to reinvent, because the role changes so frequently. I mean, you can go from 0 to 3 million in revenue in a matter of a year or 2 years. And there's a ton of change into how that leader needs to show up through those stages. And so the majority of our programs are focused on two components. One, the founder's transformation through those stages of the company. Think about, there's really different stages at the 1s and 3s of every business. So 100,000 to 300,000, 300,000 to 1 million, 1 million to 3 million, 3 million to 10, 10 to 30. Really different demands of a founder. We've highlighted a few of them. The second thing we focus on is focusing on the right lever or the right problem in the business. We say all the time that sequencing equals success. So you can deploy really great execution on the wrong project. And I don't know if you ever felt this, Nathan. You're like, man, I worked really hard and it didn't change revenue at all.
Yeah.
And I did a great job on that project. Maybe it was like, hey, I recorded an incredible podcast. I've done 50 episodes on the podcast. we have lots of new users or new subscribers. It's growing with, revenue just won't move. The only time that happens is when you solve the wrong problem. So there's 3 problems in a recurring revenue business. Every single challenge that's holding back revenue growth can be grouped into 3 different buckets. And the first bucket is you can get more customers, your ability to acquire new users. The second bucket is your ability to keep them for longer, so retention. And the third one is how much are they worth to you? So to grow a business, you can either focus on getting more customers, keeping them for longer, or making them worth more. So the 2 main focuses in our programs are on building a leader and on finding the bottleneck in the business. What is the constraint? What is the right product to work on? So a lot of times we'll have founders that come to us and they'll say, hey, you know what? I don't know if I have time for another program. Like my calendar is so full. And we're like, perfect. There's probably 80% of what you're working on right now you shouldn't be working on. We're going to help find the thing you should focus on. And you can actually end up working a lot less and creating a lot more growth when you learn how to find the bottleneck in the business and deploy even average execution on the right problem will unlock more revenue growth than world-class execution on the wrong problem. Like a podcast is not going to help, just to use this example, a podcast is not going to help a business grow if top of funnel awareness, lead generation is not the problem. If getting more customers is not the problem, if it's retention or monetization, it doesn't matter how much traffic we throw at the problem. It's not, the revenue is not going to move. And so a lot of our work is find the right problem and support the founder in executing, that the project that unlocks that bottleneck.
I've heard it said like the role of a CEO is to, communicate and reiterate the vision and mission and values repeatedly. And then the second job is like recruiting top talent. What would you say, less or more? Is that kind of how you'd view it? Well, how would you kind of look at your role of like what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think that advice has to be contextualized to the stage of the business that you're in. So typically, if you're doing less than 10 million in annual revenue, you might have the title of CEO, but you probably also wear some other hats in the business, right? You're a little more involved in sales. You're a little more involved in product. You're a little more in some area of the business. You are more involved. Typically around 10 million, you can exclusively say, yeah, those are the 3 things: people, money, vision. That's it. When you're fully in the role of a CEO, vision for the company, the people supporting that vision, and the cash in the business. So I absolutely say that's typically like what the majority of my time is spent on those 3 things. Now in our business, we're also at SaaS Academy, I'm very involved in our product. So in the design of our product, and I kind of lump that into vision. Like when I say, hey, our mission is to help SaaS founders achieve their perfect exit. So that means they've gotten to a point in the business where they have choices now. They could sell this business because it is a real valuable asset, or they could hire an executive team to only focus on the parts of the company that they want. But at the point in the business when they have options, that is our mission at SaaS Academy. So in that, a lot of my time is spent on how effective are our programs at getting founders results. Like Nathan, if I only cared about revenue, we'd just sell courses. I have campus full of 500 playbooks. So if it's just about revenue, I'd have 3 employees. I have a great demand, direct response marketer, and I have someone to count all the money, and I would just sell courses. But we're like really, really focused on the people that come into our program getting massive ROI and getting to that perfect exit. So I do spend a lot of my time just getting customer feedback, evaluating how effective are we at training people, and taking them through the transformations that I've talked through. So I think it really depends on the level of business you're at. But if you are responsible, if you are the CEO, you're the founder, to not focus on the alignment of your team and the vision of where you're going would be really irresponsible. You're going to end up wasting a lot of money. So those might be parts of your job. Just depends on as you scale the company, they become more and more your singular focus.
You brought up that most people are spinning their wheels on many things that aren't really helpful for driving. What are some of the common things that you've seen people do that aren't really successful to help them grow?
Oh man, there's a lot out there. I think that it really comes down to like if you have, for example, the three that I mentioned, you can get more customers, keep them for longer, or make them worth more. I'll say a lot of people avoid the pricing conversation. They don't build the skills of monetizing their
Mm.
product or services or changing, especially in a recurring revenue business model. Like I can't tell you, Nathan, how many people come to us and we ask them, when was the last time you did a price increase? And they'll say 3 years ago. And then the last time they did a price increase, it was only on their new customers. So they've got clients that are
Mm.
grandfathered in 5, 6, 7 years old on a plan. And just, the same way that you can build a skill around marketing better and around building better products, like pricing optimization is a skill. There's a whole bunch of fears around that, around will I churn customers out? I want them, I want clients have been loyal to us. I want to be loyal to them. There's a right way to have that conversation, and to build that skill set so that you do build it. So I'll say one of the, it, it's the answer to your question is an avoidance around pricing is one of the, would be one in favor of the thing that they're good at. And that is, if you're a product person, you typically don't love spending time on
Mm.
sales and marketing. And if you're a sales and marketing side and you don't know the technical side, you typically like to spend more time on sales and marketing than you do on the product. And so, as a founder, a lot of times it's going back to your question of like, how much do we focus on recruiting world-class talent? Well, you just got to know, like, one, is this a skill set that I'm going to build, or I'm going to have to hire out for it? But the business needs all of those things. And when the business needs, focus on customer success or on retention, or when it needs sales and marketing, you have to either put company resources around it, or you've got to be the person that solves that problem. And so, a lot of times when you're spinning your wheels, you are working on things that feel productive. But it's very important to remember, and I literally lost decades to this belief. It is really important to remember that hard work and value creation are not directly correlated. Okay. So you don't just get to, there's no like badge as a SaaS founder, no matter how gritty you are and how much you put up with. Sometimes we build this belief that, I've done the hard work. I deserve for this company to grow because I'm willing to invest way hours. I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm investing a ton. The problem is, Nathan, unless it's on the right problem, you don't grow. So you could actually work. I had this, one of my favorite stories with a founder. I remember it was so hard for me to believe. I was interviewing the clients that had the highest revenue growth in one of our core programs. So we had a program that typically served clients between 100K in revenue and 2 million. And I had a client in there at 4 million. And so I asked him for an interview, and I want to sit down and just kind of understand more about, hey, why are you in the program? What do you like about it? Because my thesis was he should have been in a higher end program. But one of the requirements for our higher end program was that you had to have an executive team. And so in a conversation with this guy, I found out it's him and his co-founder, the only two people in the business, and they're doing 4 million in annual revenue. They have made a commitment. We're going to build this as big as we possibly can. We want no team members. We don't have to manage anyone. And to me, it was a oh man, I lost my train of thought of where I was going with that. But it challenged this this theory that
What's so
I forgot where I was
unique? I
going
mean,
with that.
I've
Nathan. I can't
heard of
remember
that
why.
with founders that are just so stubborn because they don't want to employ people, or they don't want to give jobs, or they think they could do it better. I mean, it's really odd. I've heard and seen so many of those people that are just like, they don't want to grow and expand, and they limit their capacity for growth because of that focus. And you're like, why? And you don't understand why they're thinking that way. It's really,
Yeah, but it's also like, the business, you hire a business to do a job. Really, if you're an entrepreneur, you're hiring that business to do a job. So what is the job? For them, it was, managing people doesn't really make us happy. We like just the two of us working on this together. And it was a completely product-led growth strategy, very low maintenance on the back end. Like they, set up a landing page. They could do everything, just the two of them, and it was the lifestyle that they enjoyed. And so, it was, they were super happy with the program and what it had taught them, and it was checking, even though it wasn't the normal definition of success, which we typically see, founders that come into our world, they're trying to grow this company as big as they possibly can. They were like, as big as we can, with a constraint that we don't want any employees. And so, yeah, it was just a, interesting use case. But, I think that it is it's really important that you're clear on what am I hiring the business for, right? And then we stay away from pet projects. If the goal is revenue growth, we focus on the things that need to be done. And sometimes they're going to be projects that you like, and sometimes they're going to be projects that you don't like. But if you want the business to grow, there's no gold star for, hey, you worked really hard, now you get to, revenue growth just happens. It's a math problem, and you got to solve the part of the math problem that needs to be solved if you're going to unlock revenue growth.
Johnny, I've appreciated you being on the podcast here. How can people follow you though further and connect with, SaaS Academy and just learn more about what you do and the knowledge that you hold?
Yep. LinkedIn profile is just Johnny Page on LinkedIn. I publish a lot there. Also publish a lot on Instagram, Johnny Page 13 there. You can follow us at SaaS Academy, just SaaSacademy.com. I got a YouTube channel. I got a podcast. If you are in SaaS, lots of content coming out there. Softwarebook.com is where you can find the book. Software is a Science. We give it away for free. All you got to do is pay shipping. There's tons and tons of resources in our readers portal for those that do purchase. But Amazing. That's where you can find me. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Nathan.
I'll put all those details down below so everybody can grab those. If you haven't got connected with the training that I have below in the show notes as well, around how to build a brand, how to market yourself, how to do sales, make sure to check that out. My gift to you. Johnny, appreciate you being on. And again, we will see you on the next episode.